two rancher brothers saved an Apache girl. 20 years later, she returned when they faced danger. The sun was just beginning to rise over the wide, dusty plains of Arizona. Its light touched the mountains in the distance, painting them in shades of orange and gold. On the McAllister Ranch, two brothers, John and Thomas, were already awake. The brothers had spent their entire lives working the land. Their father had taught them everything about ranching, from feeding the cattle to mending fences, and now, in their 30s, they ran the ranch on their own. Life was hard, but they were used to it. The mornings were for checking the herds, the afternoons for repairing the corral, and the evenings for sitting on the porch, watching the sky change colors and listening to the soft whispers of the desert wind. John, the older brother by 3 years, was tall and strong with broad shoulders and hands calloused from years of work. Thomas was smaller but quicker, with bright eyes that missed nothing. The brothers were very close, not just because they were family, but because they had always relied on each other. Together they could face anything the desert threw at them, from sudden storms to wild animals. That morning, like many others, they saddled their horses and rode out to check on the cattle grazing near a canyon. The land was beautiful, but unforgiving. Rocks jutted out from the ground, and thorny bushes scratched at their legs as they rode past. The brothers were quiet, each lost in thought. Suddenly, John raised his hand, signaling Thomas to stop. "What is it?" Thomas asked, squinting toward the canyon. John pointed. "Over there. Something is moving." At first, it looked like a shadow. But as they got closer, they could see a small figure struggling near a rocky outcrop. It was a girl, no older than 10, with tangled black hair and clothes torn from the brush. She was trying to climb up the rocks, but she kept slipping, her tiny hands bleeding from the rough stone. Without thinking, Thomas jumped off his horse and ran toward her, with John following closely. The girl looked up, fear in her dark eyes, and froze. She seemed terrified of the men, but she was also desperate for help. "Hey there," John called softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "We're not going to hurt you." The girl hesitated, then started to cry. Her sobs were small but full of fear. Thomas reached her first. "It's okay, we'll help you," he said, offering his hand. At first the girl pulled back, but she was too exhausted to resist. Slowly, trembling, she let Thomas help her to her feet. She looked at the brothers with wide eyes, as if trying to decide whether she could trust them. John noticed that she had a small, deep cut on her arm and some bruises on her legs. She had obviously been running for a long time, and something told him she had been running from danger. "Where are your parents?" Thomas asked, gently. The girl shook her head and whispered something in a language the brothers didn't understand. John exchanged a quick glance with Thomas. They had heard some Apache words from traders before, and they realized she was Apache. The brothers didn't know exactly what had happened, but they understood one thing clearly. The girl needed help. She couldn't survive alone in the desert. John helped the girl onto his horse, while Thomas led their own horses and guided her carefully through the rocky terrain. They could hear voices in the distance, shouting and angry, and they knew it was probably the outlaws the girl had been running from. John urged his horse faster, and Thomas did the same, keeping the girl safe between them. They rode for what felt like hours, through narrow canyons and over dry riverbeds. The sun climbed higher, burning the skin and making the desert shimmer with heat. The girl's small frame shook from fear and exhaustion. Thomas kept talking softly to her, telling her they would keep her safe. He didn't know if she understood the words, but the sound of his voice seemed to calm her a little. Finally, they reached a shaded area near a small stream. The girl's horse stumbled slightly on the loose rocks, and she fell into Thomas's arms. He caught her just in time. She buried her face in his chest and cried quietly. John looked around the desert, his jaw tight. "We need to get her somewhere safe, somewhere she can rest and heal." Thomas nodded. "The ranch. She'll be safe there." The ride back to the ranch was slower. The brothers didn't speak much, but their minds were racing. They knew that taking in an Apache girl would not be easy. Many settlers didn't trust the Apache, and some even disliked them. But they also knew they couldn't leave her in the desert to fend for herself. When they finally reached the ranch, their horses were tired and sweaty. They led the girl to the main house, where the warm smell of breakfast still lingered. Their mother had passed away years ago, but they had a few old neighbors who helped them with the ranch work. One of them, Mrs. Bad, Parlow, took one look at the girl and immediately fetched a clean blanket and some water. The girl sat on the blanket, still shivering as Mrs. Quinton. Harlow gently cleaned her cuts and bruises. John and Thomas watched quietly, unsure of what to say. The girl stared at them with wide, dark eyes, her small hands clutching the blanket tightly. "Don't be afraid," John said softly. "You're safe now." The girl looked up, her eyes meeting his, and for the first time since they found her, she seemed to believe it. She nodded slightly, still trembling but no longer trying to run away. Over the next few days, the brothers took care of her. They gave her clean clothes, food, and a safe place to sleep. They taught her how to ride a horse, how to feed the cattle, and how to help with chores around the ranch. The girl was quick to learn and surprisingly brave. She was small but fierce, and it became clear that she had survived in the desert not just because of luck, but because of courage and determination. The brothers also learned her name, Nahale. It was a name that meant strong wind in her language. It suited her perfectly, John thought, because she had arrived like a gust of wind into their quiet lives, changing everything. As the days turned into weeks, Nahala began to feel more comfortable at the ranch. She laughed when Thomas taught her to rope cattle and ran with John across the fields. The brothers, in turn, felt a protective pride in watching her grow stronger each day. But life was not without its challenges. Some neighbors whispered behind their backs, questioning why the brothers were helping an Apache girl. Some looked at Nahel with suspicion or fear, but John and Thomas ignored the whispers. They had made a choice, and they would stick by it. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains and the sky turned shades of pink and purple, Nahel sat with the brothers on the porch. She held a small, smooth stone she had found in the riverbed and turned it over in her hands. "Why did you help me?" she asked in broken English. John looked at her and smiled gently. "Because it was the right thing to do. No one deserves to be alone and in danger. And because now you're part of our family." Nahel smiled shyly, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. She didn't fully understand the words, but she felt their meaning in her heart. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. That night, as the stars filled the sky, the brothers and Nahel sat by the fire. They shared stories, laughter, and a quiet peace. The desert outside was still and vast, but within the small circle of firelight there was safety, warmth, and the beginning of a bond that would last a lifetime. And so the story of John, Thomas, and Nahel began. A story of courage, kindness, and the simple truth that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is help someone in need. In the heart of the harsh Arizona desert, two brothers had saved a young girl, and in doing so, they had changed all their lives. Forever, life at the McAllister Ranch settled into a steady rhythm. The sun rose early over the desert, and each day brought its own work and small adventures. For John and Thomas, the ranch was everything. It was their home, their livelihood, and their connection to the life their father had taught them to love. But now there was someone new to care for. Nahale. Nahale had grown stronger since the day the brothers had found her. Her hair, once tangled and dusty, was now brushed and tied neatly. Her small hands were calloused from helping with chores, but she did not mind. Each bruise and scratch she earned was a sign of her courage and determination. She had learned quickly how to help with the cattle, how to mend fences, and how to carry water from the nearby stream. The brothers were patient teachers, always encouraging, never harsh. John watched her one morning as she led a small group of cows back to the corral. She moved with confidence now, her eyes scanning the field for strays. He smiled to himself, amazed at how far she had come in just a few months. Thomas rode up beside him. "She's getting better every day," Thomas said. "I think she's going to be the best rider we've ever trained," John chuckled. "She already has more courage than some men twice her age. Just wait, one day she'll be running this ranch with us." Nahale loved learning, but she also loved exploring. The desert was full of wonders for a young girl. She would wander near the cliffs, watching the hawks soar above, and collect small stones and feathers as treasures. Sometimes she would follow the stream as it twisted and turned through the land, imagining it was a great river that led to distant lands. The brothers always kept a careful eye on her, knowing the desert could be dangerous if she wandered too far. Despite the joy of her new life, Nahale never forgot her past. Sometimes, when she was alone, she would sit quietly and speak softly in her own language, remembering the family she had lost. The brothers never interrupted. They understood that this was part of her, and they respected it. They knew that love and care could not erase memories, but it could offer safety and hope. The brothers and Nahale developed a strong routine. Each morning, John would check the cattle with Nahale following behind, learning how to notice which cows were sick or straying. Thomas would repair fences, and Nahale would help, passing him tools or holding boards in place. The work was tiring, but they all found joy in it. Evenings were for cooking, sharing meals, and sitting by the fire. Nahale loved listening to the brothers' stories of their father and of the old days on the ranch. As time went on, Nahale grew closer to the brothers than she could have imagined. She called John Big Brother and Thomas Little Brother, and they, in turn, treated her as part of the family. They laughed together, teased one another, and supported each other through small challenges. The bond they shared was special, not just a friendship, but a family. But life at the ranch was not without its difficulties. Some neighbors and townspeople did not approve of the brothers helping an Apache girl. Whispers followed them when they went to town, questioning their choice and spreading rumors. Some even avoided doing business with them, thinking it was dangerous to associate with someone who was not from their community. John and Thomas noticed the disapproval but refused to let it change their hearts. They believed that what was right was more important than what others thought. They had rescued Nahale when she was in danger, and they would continue to protect her no matter what anyone said. One day a man from town came to the ranch. He had a stern look on his face and carried a small bag of supplies. "Evening, McAllisters," the man said, his voice low. "I hear you've taken in an Apache girl." John nodded calmly. "Yes, we have. She was alone and in danger. She's safe here." The man frowned. "You know people don't like it. You might get trouble for this." Thomas stepped forward, his eyes steady. "We know the risks, but leaving her alone in the desert would be far worse." The man shook his head but said nothing more. He left, and the brothers returned to their work, knowing that their choice had been the right one. Nahale, despite her young age, was beginning to understand the challenges of being different in the eyes of others. She would sometimes ask quietly, "Will they ever like me?" John would kneel beside her and take her small hands in his. Some people might never understand, but that's okay. What matters is that we care for each other and that we are kind, Thomas would add. And you're strong, Nahel. Stronger than anyone I know. That's what counts. As the years passed, Naheli grew into a young woman. She learned not only the skills needed to survive on the ranch, but also the wisdom to navigate the world. She could ride faster than many men, rope cattle with ease, and even help with tricky decisions about the ranch. The brothers trusted her judgment and often sought her opinion, treating her as an equal. She also learned about the land itself. John taught her how to read the sky for signs of storms, and Thomas showed her how to find water in the driest places. She became attuned to the sounds of the desert, the whisper of the wind through the grasses, the calls of distant animals, the subtle shifts in temperature that told her when a storm was coming. The desert, which had once seemed so harsh and dangerous, now felt like home. Nahal's presence brought new life to the ranch. The brothers, who had once worked tirelessly with little joy outside of their duties, found themselves laughing more, sharing more stories, and feeling a warmth they hadn't realized was missing. Neighbors slowly began to notice her skills and her courage. Some even began to respect the brothers more for their dedication and kindness. But there were still moments of challenge. One afternoon, a young calf wandered too close to a canyon edge. Nahal noticed immediately and ran toward it, shouting for John and Thomas. The calf teetered dangerously, and the ground beneath it was loose. Without thinking, Nahal reached for the animal, pulling it back to safety just as it was about to fall. John and Thomas arrived moments later, breathless with concern.
"You saved its life," John said, his voice filled with awe.
Thomas nodded, shaking his head. "And you're brave, Nahal. Braver than anyone I know." Nahal smiled, a mixture of pride and humility on her face. She had learned that courage was not just about strength. It was about acting even when scared, and caring for others. Evenings at the ranch were often filled with stories around the fire. Nahal loved listening to tales of the old days, of her brother's father, of the challenges he faced and the lessons he taught them. Sometimes she would share stories from her own childhood in the language of her people, and the brothers would listen quietly, understanding more than words could express. They respected her culture and encouraged her to remember it. As she grew, Nahal began to think about the wider world. She knew there was more beyond the ranch, beyond the desert, beyond the mountains, but she also knew that no matter where life took her, she had a family here, a home that had taken her in when she had no one. The bond between the three of them was strong and unbreakable, built on trust, kindness, and shared experiences. One late evening, as the sky turned to deep shades of purple and orange, the three of them sat on the porch, looking at the stars. The desert stretched endlessly before them, quiet and calm. "Do you ever miss your family?" John asked softly. Nahal nodded. "Yes, sometimes, but I am happy here too." Thomas put an arm around her shoulders. "Then we're all happy together. That's what matters." Nahal smiled, leaning into the warmth of their presence. She had learned that family was not just about blood, but about who was there for you, who cared for you, and who would protect you when the world seemed against you. And so, life at the ranch continued. Days were long, filled with work and learning, but also laughter and growth. Nahale became an inseparable part of the McAllister Ranch. She was more than a helper or a guest. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. The brothers felt proud of her, and she felt proud to be part of their family. Through challenges and hardships, through whispers of disapproval and moments of doubt, the bond between John, Thomas, and Nahale grew stronger. The desert, which had once seemed lonely and dangerous, now held safety, love, and belonging. And in this place, a young girl who had once been lost and alone found a family, a home, and the courage to face whatever life might bring next. The story of the McAllisters and Nahale was just beginning. But one thing was clear. They had formed a bond that would last a lifetime, a bond built on trust, kindness, and courage, a bond that would one day be tested in ways none of them could yet imagine. Years passed, and the McAllister Ranch became a place of comfort, routine, and growth. Nahale had grown into a strong, intelligent, and independent young woman. She was no longer the frightened girl the brothers had rescued from the desert. She was confident, skilled, and proud. Her connection with John and Thomas had only deepened over time. She trusted them like family, and they relied on her as much as she relied on them. Despite this, Nahale's heart often wandered to thoughts of her own people. The Apache tribe she had been born into, the family she had lost, and the culture that had been part of her life before the desert had taken her. They were always in her mind. She would spend quiet moments gazing at the distant mountains, imagining the lands she had once known, the faces of those she had loved, and the stories of her people. One afternoon, she was helping Thomas mend a fence along the northern edge of the ranch when a rider approached. The man wore simple clothes and a wide-brimmed hat, but his presence immediately drew Nahale's attention. He dismounted and bowed slightly. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice polite. "Are you Nahale?" Nahale nodded, curious and cautious. "My name is Greyhawk," the man continued. "I have news from your tribe. Your family, your people, they are alive, and they want to see you." Nahale's heart raced. She had spent years imagining this moment, but never believed it could truly happen. Her hands trembled slightly, and Thomas noticed. "What is it, Nahale?" he asked softly.
It's my family," she whispered. "They want to see me."
John and Thomas exchanged glances. They had always known this day might come, even if they hoped it would not be soon. They understood that Nahale's heart was bound not just to the ranch, but to her people and her heritage. They also knew that she had the right to follow her own path, no matter how difficult it might be for them. Over the next few days, Nahale spoke often with the brothers about her feelings. She described her longing to see her tribe, her fear of leaving the place that had become home, and her gratitude for the love and care they had given her. "I don't want to hurt you," she said one evening as they sat by the fire.
"You saved me. You gave me a home when I had nowhere else."
"But I need to see them. I need to know my family is safe." John reached out and took her hand gently. "Nahale, we understand. You've always had a home here with us, but we would never hold you back from finding your people." "We want you to be happy and safe," Thomas nodded. "And we'll always be your family, no matter where you go. You will always have a place here." The decision was not easy. Nahale spent hours thinking, walking along the desert ridges and listening to the wind. She recalled the days she had spent exploring the ranch, the lessons she had learned, and the laughter and warmth she had shared with John and Thomas. But she also felt the pull of her roots, the call of her heritage, and the desire to know the people she had never forgotten. Finally, after long nights of reflection, Nahale made her choice. She would leave the ranch to reunite with her tribe. She knew it was the right thing, even though it filled her with sadness. She wanted to honor her past, while carrying the love and lessons of the brothers with her. The day of her departure arrived, and the ranch was quiet. The sun rose slowly over the desert, casting long shadows across the fields. John and Thomas helped Nahale pack her few belongings, small items she had kept close for years. There was a horse ready for her journey, and Greyhawk, the messenger from her tribe, was waiting. Naheli turned to the brothers, her eyes glistening with tears. "I will miss you," she said softly. John knelt down to her level and held her hands. "And we will miss you, Nahel, but this is your path. Go with courage and know that you are loved." Thomas smiled, though his own eyes were wet. "Remember everything you learned here. Use it to stay strong and brave, just like you always have." Nahel embraced them both tightly. The warmth of their arms and the safety of their presence had been her world for years, and leaving it was not easy. But she knew that this was part of life, growing, learning, and following her heart. The journey to her tribe was not simple. The desert was vast, and the sun beat down relentlessly, but Nahel's skills, honed at the ranch, guided her every step. She rode with confidence, careful and alert, and Greyhawk accompanied her, telling stories of her family's survival and the life of the tribe. Along the way, she encountered signs of the land she had once known. Birds soared overhead, the riverbanks were filled with small animals, and the wind carried scents that reminded her of her earliest memories. Each sight and sound strengthened her resolve, reminding her of the strength and courage she had always possessed. As they approached the Apache lands, Nahel felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Would they recognize her? Would she feel at home after so many years away? Her heart raced with anticipation. Finally, the tribe came into view. Families moved through the village, tending to daily tasks, while children played in the open spaces. When Nahel stepped off her horse, a woman ran toward her, tears streaming down her face. "He did have a passion for ourselves." "It was her mother, Nahel," she cried, gathering her daughter into a tight embrace. "You are safe. You are here. We feared we had lost you forever." Nahel buried her face in her mother's shoulder, overwhelmed by emotion. All the years of separation, fear, and longing seemed to vanish in that single moment. Her father and siblings joined, and the family stood together, tears of joy and relief flowing freely. Though the reunion was full of happiness, Nahel never forgot the brothers who had saved her. She told her family about John and Thomas, the love and safety they had given her, and the lessons she had learned on the ranch. Her parents were grateful and respectful, understanding that the brothers had been more than protectors. They had been family. Naheli spent the next weeks learning about her tribe's ways, reconnecting with her people, and sharing stories of her life at the McAllister Ranch. She taught some of the younger children how to ride horses and care for the land, skills she had learned from John and Thomas. The tribe welcomed her with open arms, grateful for her courage and wisdom. Even as she settled into her life with the tribe, Nahel kept the ranch and the brothers close in her heart. She would often think of the wide plains, the morning sun, and the lessons of loyalty, courage, and kindness that had shaped her. She knew that no matter where life took her, the bond she shared with John and Thomas would never fade. Yet life, as always, is full of surprises. Nahele felt a quiet sense of anticipation, a feeling that her journey was not yet complete. Though she was home with her family, a part of her still remembered the ranch, the brothers, and the love that had saved her years ago. She carried that love like a shield, ready for whatever challenges or adventures lay ahead. And so, Naheli began a new chapter of her life, one that connected her past and her present, her family and her people. She was brave, strong, and full of hope. She had survived the desert, built a home with the brothers, and returned to her own people with courage and dignity. She had learned that life could be both harsh and beautiful, full of challenges and joy, and that love and loyalty could guide her through even the darkest times. Even as she laughed with her siblings, helped her mother, and learned from her tribe, Nahale often closed her eyes and remembered the brothers. She remembered the sound of their voices, the warmth of their arms, and the safety they had provided. She knew that one day, perhaps, their paths would cross again. And when that day came, she would be ready. Not just as a girl they had saved, but as a strong, independent woman who had grown with courage, heart, and love. For now, she smiled at the bright sky, feeling the wind in her hair, and whispered a silent promise to the brothers that she would never forget them, that their bond would last forever, and that whatever the future held, she would always honor the love and kindness that had shaped her life. 20 years had passed since Nahale had left the McAllister Ranch to return to her Apache family. In that time, John and Thomas had aged, though the desert and ranch life had kept them strong. The ranch was still their life's work, and they maintained it with the same dedication their father had taught them. The land had changed slightly over the years. The fence lines were sturdier, the barns slightly weathered, and the cattle herd larger, but the rhythm of life remained steady. The brothers had grown older, their hair tinged with gray and their steps slower but still firm. They had worked hard to keep the ranch alive, even as neighbors moved away and towns changed. For years, life had been predictable, peaceful, and filled with small joys, the quiet mornings with cattle grazing, the sunsets that painted the desert sky, and the evenings spent around the fire, sharing stories of the past. But life on the frontier was never completely safe. One late spring, as the sun burned high in the sky and the desert air shimmered with heat, trouble arrived at the ranch in a way the brothers had not expected. A gang of outlaws, drawn by rumors of the McAllisters' prosperous ranch, had begun scouting the land. They were a rough group, men who did not care about the law or the people they threatened. They had heard tales of the brothers' courage and skill, but they also knew that age might have slowed them down. The first sign of danger came one afternoon when John was inspecting the northern fence line. He noticed tracks in the dirt, deep, heavy boot prints that did not belong to the usual ranch workers. He followed them cautiously, observing that the prints led toward the corral. "Thomas," John called when he returned to the main house, "we might have visitors we don't want." Thomas set down the tools he had been using. His brow furrowed, and he followed John outside. Together, they studied the tracks carefully. It was clear that the men had been on horseback and had been moving quietly, almost like hunters. "They're planning something," Thomas said. "Probably to take cattle, maybe even try to take the ranch itself." John nodded. "We've faced danger before, but we need to be careful. This isn't a small group of rustlers."
They're organized. The brothers began preparing immediately.
They reinforced the fences, secured the barns, and made sure the cattle were safely corralled. They also prepared themselves, checking their old rifles and keeping watch over the ranch from dawn until dusk. The desert had taught them patience, observation, and strategy, and now those skills would be tested once more. As the days passed, tension grew. The brothers could see signs of the gang scouting from a distance, and occasionally they caught glimpses of riders near the edge of the property. The outlaws were calculating, cautious, and clearly aware of the brothers' reputation for courage, but John and Thomas were determined not to give in without a fight. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, John and Thomas sat on the porch discussing their options. "We've managed threats before," John said, his voice calm but firm. "But this time, they're more dangerous. We can't let them get the upper hand." Thomas nodded. "We'll need to be smart. We know this land better than they do, and we have the advantage of knowing every ridge, every path, every hiding place." Despite their courage, a quiet worry lingered in both their hearts. They had faced danger together for decades, but the thought of being outnumbered and overwhelmed was unsettling. The ranch was not just a home, it was their life's work, a legacy they had built from the ground up. Losing it was unthinkable. That night, as they prepared for a long watch, a sudden movement caught John's eye. Shadows shifted near the corral, and he could see figures moving carefully, almost silently, among the cattle. The gang had begun their attempt. "Thomas," John whispered, pointing. "They're here." "Get ready." Thomas moved quietly to his position, keeping low and observing the outlaws. The brothers' experience and knowledge of the land gave them confidence, but the danger was real. The men were skilled, fast, and determined. The brothers would need every ounce of their courage and wit to protect the ranch. For hours they watched the gang's movements, waiting for the right moment to act. The outlaws tried to separate the cattle, using noise and fire to create panic. But John and Thomas anticipated their moves, guiding the cattle into safer pens and blocking the gang's paths. Their strategy was careful and precise, each action measured to protect the ranch and their livestock. As the standoff continued, the brothers realized that the outlaws were growing impatient. They would not retreat easily, and the situation could escalate quickly. John considered calling for help from neighbors, but most had moved away or were too fearful to intervene. It seemed that the brothers were on their own. Thomas glanced at his older brother. "We can't hold them off forever," he said quietly. "There's too many of them." John nodded, his jaw tight. "We have to keep them at bay until daylight. Maybe then we can outsmart them. We know this land. They don't." The night stretched, long and tense. Every rustle of wind, every snap of a twig sent their hearts racing. They stayed low, moving silently, keeping the gang from gaining any advantage. It was exhausting work, both physically and mentally, but neither brother faltered. As dawn approached, a faint memory of Nahale came to John's mind. She had always been clever, brave, and resourceful. He remembered how she had faced danger as a young girl, and how her courage had amazed them both. A sudden thought struck him. If she were here, she would know exactly what to do. He shared the idea with Thomas. "We could use a diversion, something to draw their attention away from the cattle and give us the chance to gain the high ground." Thomas nodded slowly. "Yes, but what can we do?" The brothers worked quickly, setting up a plan. They moved quietly among the shadows, using the terrain to their advantage. Rocks, hills, and narrow paths became tools in their strategy. They created noise in one area to draw the gang away from the main corral, giving them the chance to secure the cattle and take control of key positions. The plan worked, but just barely. The outlaws were clever and persistent, and the standoff continued into the morning. Exhausted and tense, the brothers realized that they were facing more than just a simple threat. They were facing a test of all their years of experience, courage, and loyalty to each other. At that moment, a figure appeared on the horizon. At first, the brothers thought it was one of the gang scouts, but as the figure drew closer, they saw that it was a woman, strong, confident, and moving with purpose. Her presence was commanding, and there was something familiar about the way she rode. John squinted, and recognition hit him like a wave. It can't be Nahale. Thomas turned to see the woman as she approached. His eyes widened. It's her. It's really her. Nahale, now a grown woman and a skilled Apache warrior, had returned. She had heard of the danger facing the brothers and had come with allies from her tribe to help. She guided her group strategically, taking positions that allowed the brothers to finally gain the upper hand. Together, they outsmarted the gang, forcing the outlaws to retreat and leaving the McAllisters and their ranch safe once more. The tension lifted, and the brothers embraced Nahale, their relief and joy overwhelming. The years of separation melted away in that moment. Nahel had returned not just as the girl they had rescued, but as a strong, capable woman who had grown even braver with time. As the sun rose fully over the desert, painting the land in golden light, the brothers, Nahel and her allies, stood together. They had faced danger, and together they had triumphed. The bond forged decades earlier, through courage, kindness, and love, had proven unbreakable. For John and Thomas, the sight of Nahel standing beside them was a reminder that the choices we make to help others can echo across time. They had saved a young girl, and in return she had returned to protect them when they needed it most. The ranch was safe, the cattle were secure, and the outlaws were gone. But more importantly, the brothers realized that family is not always defined by blood. It is defined by loyalty, love, and courage. And in Nahel, they had found a lifelong connection that no danger, no matter how great, could ever destroy. The morning after the outlaws had fled, the McAllister Ranch was quiet again. The sun rose slowly over the desert, turning the sky shades of gold and pink. The air was calm, and for the first time in weeks, John and Thomas felt the weight of worry lift from their shoulders. They walked among the cattle, checking each one, making sure none had been harmed during the chaos. Nahele, now fully grown and strong, moved beside them. Her presence was both reassuring and comforting. She had proven her courage and skill, helping the brothers out of a dangerous situation that might have been impossible to face alone. Watching her ride among the cattle, confident and capable, John and Thomas could hardly believe how much time had passed since the day they had found her as a frightened little girl in the desert. "You've changed a lot," Thomas said, his voice a mixture of pride and amazement. "You're incredible." Nahele smiled, a gentle warmth in her eyes. "I learned from the best," she replied, looking at both brothers. "You taught me everything I needed to survive here, and more. You taught me courage, patience, and loyalty." John nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting years of emotion. "And you've reminded us what family really means. I-J-D-D-D-D. You were always brave, Nahel. We only helped you see it for yourself." The day passed slowly, with the ranch returning to its natural rhythm. The cattle grazed peacefully, and the desert seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Yet, beneath the calm, there was a new energy. Nahel's return had brought more than just safety. It had brought life and joy to the brothers' days. The ranch had always been their home, but now it felt complete again. That evening, the four of them, John, Thomas, Nahel, and one of her trusted companions, sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the distant mountains. The desert sky shifted from gold to orange, and then to a deep purple sprinkled with stars. "You know," John said softly, "when we first found you, I never imagined this day. I didn't know if we'd ever see you again." Nahel turned to him, her expression serious. "I never forgot you. You saved me when I was helpless. You gave me a life I never thought I would have. I could never forget that." Thomas smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And you've proven that what we do for others comes back to us in ways we can't always imagine. You've grown into a remarkable woman, Nahel." The conversation drifted into silence, comfortable and full of unspoken understanding. They had all experienced fear, uncertainty, and danger, yet they had endured together. The bond between them was more than friendship. It was family, unshakable and lasting. Over the next few days, Nahel spent her time helping the brothers with the ranch, while also reconnecting with the desert lands she had known as a child. She taught John and Thomas some of the survival techniques of her people: how to read the wind for signs of rain, how to move quietly through the desert at night, and how to find hidden water sources during dry seasons. The brothers listened intently, grateful for her wisdom and skill. One afternoon, while they were repairing a section of the corral, Thomas looked at Nahel and said, "You know, it's strange. You've been gone 20 years, and yet it feels like you never left." Nahele laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face.
I never left in my heart.
"I've always thought of this place as home, just as much as your family has thought of me as one of their own." John nodded. "It's true. This ranch has always been about more than just the land. It's about the people here, the family we choose, the bonds we protect, and the courage we share." As the days passed, the brothers and Nahel worked together to ensure the ranch was secure. They repaired the fences, reinforced the barns, and even trained some of the younger cattle to follow more efficiently. But there was also time for laughter, stories, and shared memories. The evening fires were filled with conversation about the past, the challenges they had faced, and the lessons they had learned along the way. Nahele shared stories of her life with the Apache tribe, recounting experiences that taught her bravery, leadership, and resourcefulness. She spoke of her family, her friends, and the traditions she had preserved. The brothers listened with admiration and respect, realizing how much she had grown and how much strength she had gained during the years they had been apart. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the sky turned a soft pink, John spoke thoughtfully. "Nahel, you've always had courage, but you've also taught us something we sometimes forget. That family isn't just who you are born to, but who stands by you when it matters most." Nahel smiled, feeling the weight of their shared journey. "And you've taught me that kindness and loyalty can change a life forever. You believed in me when no one else could, and that gave me the strength to grow into the woman I am today." The bond between the three of them was clear to anyone who looked upon the ranch. It was a bond built on trust, love, and shared hardship. They had faced life's challenges together, saved each other in small ways and large, and now stood united, stronger than ever. Days turned into weeks, and the McAllister Ranch thrived. The outlaws had not returned, and the desert once again felt safe and peaceful. John and Thomas realized that their lives had been changed not just by their own hard work, but by the people they had helped and who had helped them in return. Nahele's return was a reminder that life could come full circle, that acts of courage and kindness could echo across time, and that loyalty could never be broken. One afternoon, as the brothers and Nahel walked among the fields, John paused and looked out at the horizon. "You know, Nahel, it feels like we've come full circle. 20 years ago we found you in danger, alone and frightened. And now you're here, stronger than ever, helping us in ways we could never have imagined." Nahele nodded, her eyes reflecting the sunlight. "And you gave me something no one else could: love, trust, and a home. That's why I came back. Because family isn't just about the past, it's about being there when it matters most." Thomas smiled, his voice warm. "You've proven that the bonds we make with courage and care are the ones that last a lifetime. We've faced danger, we've grown, and we've never been alone. And now, with you here, I feel like the family is complete." As the sun set, painting the desert in golden light, the three of them stood together side by side. The ranch was safe, the cattle were calm, and the wind whispered softly through the grasses. The world beyond the horizon seemed vast and uncertain, but in that moment, everything felt right. Nahel, John, and Thomas had all grown through the years, through danger, separation, and reunion. They had faced fear, embraced courage, and found strength in each other. The desert had tested them, but it had also brought them together, forging bonds that could never be broken. And in that quiet golden evening, with the stars beginning to appear in the sky, the three of them knew that their story, one of courage, love, and loyalty, would continue for the rest of their lives. They had survived the harshness of the desert, the challenges of the world, and the trials of time. But most importantly, they had each other. Nahele smiled at the brothers, her eyes full of gratitude and warmth. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything, for saving me, for teaching me, for believing in me, for being my family." John took her hand, his grip strong but gentle. "We only did what was right. And in return, you've shown us what true courage and loyalty mean. We're proud of you, Nahel. Proud of everything you've become," Thomas added. "And no matter what comes next, we face it together." That's what family does. As night fell over the McAllister Ranch, the desert was quiet and peaceful. The fireflies began to glow and the stars shimmered above. The brothers and Nahel sat together, sharing stories and laughter, knowing that their bond, tested by time, distance, and danger, was unbreakable. They had saved each other in ways both small and great, and they would continue to do so no matter what the future held. In the heart of the desert, with the wide sky overhead and the ranch around them, John, Thomas, and Nahel had found not only safety and home, but the most important treasure of all, each other. And that treasure, they knew, would last forever.